There is a particular kind of loneliness in midlife that nobody really talks about. Not the big dramatic kind, but the quiet kind.
When you look around and realize I'm surrounded by people, but who actually knows me right now? Not the me from 10 years ago, the me I am today.
Yes, so today we are talking about midlife friendships, why they fade, and more importantly, how to build the kind that actually last.
Welcome back to Midlife Unfiltered. I'm Jenny from Midlife Clover Community, and this is Alice from Prime Midlife. Today, we are going into something that comes up quietly but consistently in both our communities: friendship. Or more honestly, the feeling that real friendship is getting harder to find and harder to hold onto as we get older.
Yes, so we are going to look at why midlife friendships feel different, the role vulnerability plays, how to be intentional about who you invest in, and what actually keeps friendships alive when life is pulling you in different direction. So let's start with what's actually happening, because I think a lot of people carry this quiet guilt about friendships that have faded, like they failed at something. But studies show that people between 40 and 55 have around 30% fewer close friendships than they did in their 20s. And here's what is interesting. It's not primarily because people left. It's because the friendships that worked then don't work now.
That distinctions matter so much. The friendships we built in our 20s were mostly built on the proximity that shared circumstances. You live near each other, you work together, you were in the same stage of life at the same time. And when those circumstances change, there's often nothing underneath holding the connections together.
Yes, and here's what I think is the central truth about midlife friendships, and it's the one that takes most people by surprise. The friendships that last in midlife are built on something younger friendship never really needed: vulnerability.
Research tracking friendships over 20 years found that the strongest predictor of whether a friendship survived midlife was whether friends had shared real struggles with each other: money problems, career doubts, relationship fears, health scares. Friends who did that had a 73% higher chance of maintaining deep connections compared to those who only shared surface level updates. Because young friendships can survive on fun and novelty, midlife friendships needs trust. And trust only builds when you show the parts of yourself that unpolished.
Yes, and I think what makes this hard is that by midlife, we have gotten very good at performing fine, and we might carry it into our friendships too. So you can have a friendship of 15 years where the other person genuinely doesn't know what you are striving with right now.
And that gap between what you're performing and what you are actually living is where the distance grows. I know someone who have been gradually drifting from her closest friends for years. Then one day she called her, upset about a health scare. She expected a few minutes of sympathy. Instead, they talked for 2 hours. Her friends opened up about something she had been carrying alone too. That's one honest conversation revealed what years of polite catch up hadn't. They started talking weekly after that. Not because they suddenly had one more time, but because they had finally had something real to show up for.
Yes. And I want to name something that I think a lot of people feel but don't say: the guilt of letting friendship go. Because by midlife, you have accumulated friendships from so many different chapters, and there is this unspoken sense that you should be maintaining all of them.
The obligation friendships.
Yeah, absolutely. So, where you're saying yes to coffee that you don't want, you're responding to messages from people who leave you feeling drained, and somehow never finding the time for the people who actually energize you. So, I did the audit on this at some point and found that I was actually spending most of my social energy on friendships that felt like duty. The guilt of changing that was real. But so was what happened when I did.
There's research that supports exactly this. Most adults in midlife have 5 to 8 people they are genuinely call in a crisis, but spend energy maintaining relationship with more than 20.
Yes, and when midlife is actually when you earn the right to be selective. You can choose to invest your time and energy in people who align with who you actually are and who you are becoming. That is not selfish. That is actually integrity. Like a simple way to see it clearly, write two columns. The people who leave you feeling energized after you have seen them, and the people who leave you feeling drained or obligated. Be honest and see what you find.
Okay, let's get practical.
Yep.
Because I think one of the reasons midlife friendships fail is a myth about what it takes to maintain them. People assume you need chunks of time, a weekend away, a long dinner, a proper visit. And because those things are hard to schedule, the friendship quietly sleeps.
Yes, and then you are waiting for the perfect window that never comes.
Exactly.
So, the research from University of Kansas found that frequency of contact matter far more than duration. So, friends will stay connected through consistent small interactions, for example, a brief call, a short message, a quick coffee, maintain stronger bonds than friends who only show up for big occasions. So, it's all about the regularity of the signal that says, I haven't forgotten you.
I love that. A song you thought they would like, an article, a voice note on the way to somewhere. Something that says, I thought of you. That's it. Pick three friendships you want to maintain today and set a reoccurring reminder to reach out every 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be a call. The point is showing up before the silence grows too wide to cross.
Yes, and there is one more thing I want to name because I think it's the reason a lot of people walk away from a coffee with a friend feeling somehow still lonely. That is the conversation that we are actually having.
The logistic loop.
Yes. And housework. How are the kids? How's the house? And then you leave feeling like you caught up, but you didn't really connect. Research from the Journal of Social Psychology found that people who engaged in substantive conversations reported feeling 40 more percent satisfied with their friendships. And the difference wasn't about the length, it was about the depth.
So what does that look like practically?
Mm.
We can start with one real question instead of a status update. What do you want that you don't have? What would you do differently if you weren't worried about what people thought? These questions sound bigger than they are. If you are the friend who asks the real questions and actually listens to the answer, you become the friendship people make time for because you are offering something rare.
Yes, very true. And if there's one thing we want you to take from this episode, is that the friendships you want in midlife don't just happen. They are built deliberately, honestly, consistently. And the investment is smaller than you think. It just requires showing up with intention instead of waiting for the perfect time.
And we want to hear from you. What's your experience with friendship in midlife? Is it finding new ones or holding on to the ones that you feels harder? Leave a comment below because I promise you, whatever you are navigating, someone else in this community is living the same thing.
Yes, very true. And if this episode resonated, share it with a friend as an invitation where you can say, I heard something that made me think of you. And here is the link.
See you
See you next
next
week.
week.